Hope you're having an awesome day. Welcome to another episode of the Collective Evolution podcast. As always, your host, Joe Martino, founder of Collective Evolution. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that is been thrown around for like 10 years, I would think, at this point. Maybe a little less in terms of it actually being an issue that is commonly talked about, and that's called the New Age deception. And we're going to get into exactly what that means. We're going to get into the nuances of it, where I feel a lot of people sometimes either take things a little too black and white, or sometimes even within this discussion of the New Age deception, where they might even have it a little bit incorrect, because it's obviously something that we've heard a number of times, and at the same time, sometimes people will just, if you talk about spirituality, they'll just be like, oh, well, you can't talk about spirituality because that's just New Age deception. So there's been a lot of areas where people have, I guess, gotten a little bit lost in what exactly this means. And I mean, if you heard about it through Mark Passio's work, I would say for the most part, I agree with a lot of what he says, but I do think that at times, either people misinterpret some of what he's saying, or perhaps some of what he's saying is a little bit not quite the full message either, per se. And I'd love to have that discussion. That's kind of why we're doing this particular thing. It's funny. I'm going to share a little story. I've been wanting to bring a lot more comedy into my work, into what I do, whether this is podcast or video, whatever it may be. Because I mean, naturally, those who know me really well know that I'm pretty much making a joke like 24/7. But for some reason, when I go to do this work, when I turn on the camera, it's like it won't come out, and it's like I know it's not a creative block, because like when I'm on camera with like someone else and we're talking about something that's a little less serious of a topic, if you want to talk about it that way, it's no problem. It just comes out, and so here I am. I'm in this weird position where I'm like, why can't I make jokes? Why can't I make jokes about this stuff? Why do I have such a difficult time producing comedy in my consciousness work here? It's an interesting little thing I've been going through. Thought I'd share that. Should I throw that out there? Because it's tough. It's been an interesting discussion that we've been having a lot. It's like, should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I try to bring it into the equation? I don't want it to end up like JP Sears, where you have no idea whether he's serious or not serious when he's making these jokes. Like, is he making fun of spirituality? Making fun of what's going on? Is he not making fun of what's he doing? I've watched enough of that guy to know where it's like, I have no idea what he's trying to get across. So perhaps if he's ever in town, we'll do a podcast. We'll talk about it. So I'm very curious. But with that said, if you have not checked out CETV yet, be sure to do it. CETV.1. It's been pretty good in there so far. Pretty good. A number of, I guess you could say a number of excellent pieces of content that we've been releasing over the past little bit. We got this new show called Elevate that we release weekly episodes of, myself and Franco talking about consciousness, talking about current events a little bit, talking about, the shift in consciousness and so forth. And the season 1 just wrapped, and we're going to be starting season 2 probably in March, but there's still a couple episodes to be coming out season 1 by the end of February. We're going to keep rolling them out every week, but some really excellent content, really diving deep. So if you've kind of been like, yeah, I've heard all that before. Yeah, I'm ready for something more. This is the show. This is the show you want to be watching, because we kind of just blow the doors off. See, on CE, we have this formula where we're trying to share a lot of this information as it relates to current events, as it relates to our current day and age, and as it relates to what we currently try and understand, and what we what we currently do as pop culture and so forth. So meaning we're trying to inject consciousness and ask bigger questions and do that sort of stuff in a way that's palatable by a wide number of people, so that we can have these conversations regardless of where, your knowledge may or may not be on a particular subject. That's essentially what we've been trying to do. And it's tricky, because sometimes it's like you want to go deeper and talk about stuff, but then when you try that content out, it's like it goes nowhere. Like, nobody ends up seeing it, because if you know the way Facebook works, it's like stuff has to be engaged with by people. They have to click it, they have to read it, or else it doesn't go anywhere. And then sometimes you get members of the audience being like, oh, why don't you guys do this deep stuff anymore? It's like, well, because you can't. We lose money and are destroyed as a business. That's the flat out truth, right? The deeper we go on stuff, it gets no legs. It doesn't go anywhere. And then therefore you're in a position where it's like, well, I can either not be able to do this work because I won't be able to make any money to do it, and it takes, 10 people full time to make this stuff happen. Or we learn how to inject this work and this consciousness into a simpler form for people to be able to digest it. And thus it goes a lot farther. Thus we're sustainable, right? And this is why we've been working towards being, user funded, being audience funded, community funded, get conscious media, get people who are excited about conscious media, who believe in this as a movement to help change the world, to get engaged with this and participate in it, and also help to fund it, because that's the only way it's truly going to continue to spread. And I say that, and I've been saying that for like 6 months, and a lot of people have jumped on board, and we appreciate that. But a lot of times too, it's like, money's evil and I don't want to help support it. And then all of a sudden, like a year from now, let's just create a scenario. It's like, oh, conscious media is gone because, there was no funding for it. And then it'll be like, oh, goddamn, they're just trying to shut down conscious media all the time and alternative media. It's like, no, it's more so that the audience is unwilling to support it. Like as a community, we need to come together and support stuff. You support stuff that you enjoy. I do that with my own dollar. I support the things and the friends and the things that I need to support. So that's it. That's all. I just wanted to throw that out there, something to consider with all of this work. And yeah, the reality of the situation is a lot of media, a lot of businesses in general are going through periods where a lot's changing. And we've done pretty well to mitigate a lot of these changes and come up with ways to provide value and gain more financial stability. But it's still a process, that's underway. That's the reality. That's the transparency of the situation for those who are wondering. But let's get into this new age deception situation we got going on here, because I'm going to take a little drink here. It's an interesting conversation, and it's one that I think is very important because, like I say, this probably started coming up, had to have been 8 or 9 years ago, when we would post stuff and we would talk about spirituality to some extent and certain aspects of spirituality where people would just respond with, oh yeah, that's new age bullshit, and that's new age deception. And I didn't even at the time know what the heck new age meant, and so here we are today, and we're injecting consciousness into our media, and sometimes people will still bring this forward, and which is a good point. But at the same time, sometimes people will talk about new age deception and are missing a lot of nuances within the 10 points that I'm going to discuss here, that are very, very important, that are missing some of like, it's almost like the new age deceptions. There's truth to them, but then there's also some fallacy to them. So we're going to go through these 10 pretty, I guess, somewhat in depth here, and we're going to discuss them, and it's probably going to give a lot of interesting insight and talking points that when you talk to your friends or talk to other people who inevitably have heard about this or talk about this, hopefully this will give a greater sort of foundation for a discussion point where we can talk about different points and so forth, and help ultimately clear this up a little bit more out there, because it follows our current state of consciousness. We want everything to be black or white. It's got to be like, I know the truth either this way or that way. It's tough for me to be in between. Yet that's what life is asking us to do right now. That's the shift that we're going through. So, number 1 on this list, new age deception. Ignore the negative. Now, this one is fascinating because this one's very common, and essentially what it states is that, if you focus on the quote unquote negative things in our reality, then you're going to only create more of it, and it makes things worse. You're bringing down the energy of everybody, and don't focus on it. Don't talk about it. Thus, for example, don't talk about the Illuminati. Don't talk about the cabal. All that stuff is negative. That's all evil stuff that you can't talk about. If you do that, you're just giving power to it. And the sort of the deception to that is or I guess what you could call the correction to that, is ultimately that's truly just not the case at all. Nothing inherently is positive or negative. we color it that way within our own perception, right? And the reality of the situation is, if you're unwilling, well, first of all, positive and negative can be seen differently. Like you have a sports game. A team wins. You have half the people who are upset because they supported that team. Oh, don't talk about that. That's negative. We lost. A team loses. Oh, yeah, like we're happy because we were on the side where people won. Yeah, that's positive. Let's talk about that all day long. We're just coloring the same situation in two different ways, right? And that could go down into a number of different ways of looking at it too, where it's like you start getting into experiences like, let's say, murder, for example. Okay, well, murder happens. Or even the pedophilia stuff that a lot of people are talking about amongst the elite. It's like, oh yeah, that's happening. That's super negative stuff. It's like, so don't talk about that because that's just bad. It's like, well, hold on a second. Why is this happening in society? Why is the pedophilia there? What are these people experiencing that allows them to go and take these acts and commit these acts? And, people will be like, oh, it's because they're just evil. Well, hold on a second. In one discussion, we talk about how we're source. And if you look from a quantum physics perspective, you look at a science perspective, we start to understand that consciousness is at the foundation of everything. And for those who have studied near-death experiences, who have seen and who have chronicled what happens, and even people who remember their state of being in between lives, which there's tons of people who recall this, right? The research is out there in the plenty. Look at Dolores Cannon, look at, there's like about 7,000 people that have been studied in depth on that particular thing. But even when you look into NDEs and all that sort of stuff, or even people who deeply practice meditation and they don't identify with the body in this physical realm, but are able to observe other aspects of the totality of our creation, you start to understand that source consciousness, that which is the fabric of everything, that everything is created from, which scientifically we understand exists. The question is, do we scientifically yet understand some of the characteristics of it? Well, some, but not all. But that's neither here nor there. Let's look at what we're taking from a lot of these studies and so forth that have been going on within these people, is that once you step out of the human body and you step out of the human consciousness and mind, and you tap into the greater aspect of what's going on, you no longer color experiences as good, bad, right, or wrong, for the most part. Suddenly you see the experience for, oh, that was an experience. That was an experience I had that allowed me to grow, that allowed me to come, and move through something. Thus, inherently, a lot of the experiences that we observe as negative are not actually negative. It's just how we're coloring the situation. And if you're unwilling to look at a situation, to look at what's going on in our world and understand and say, hey, this is a little bit of a harder thing to look at. It's a little challenging to see that, hey, we got, child pedophilia going on at the elite levels of politics. I don't want to look at that because that's negative. Well, guess what? You're not looking at that, burying your head in the sand and not seeing what's happening is really just allowing more of it to happen, because the reason why it's coming to our perception, the reason why so much of this is coming forward, is it's asking for humanity, saying, we have to face this. We have to look at how this reflects and how this represents our overall state of collective consciousness, the disconnection that we have, the various things that we got going on, and say, it's time to process it. And as we process it, we move through it. And as we process it, we pull the power out of the need for the role, for others to play that role within our overall game we have here called life, right? And it's like people will say, oh, that way of looking at it just makes evil people seem okay. It's like, no, it doesn't do that at all. That's again, another mental objection that we come up with. What it does is it looks at the quote unquote evil people and what they're doing, and it says, I see that what they're doing is not creating a harmonious state within our way of living and way of being. Instead of just calling them obscenities, how do we actually solve the problem? Well, in order to solve the problem, we have to stop coloring it as this negative thing and being like, oh, I can't look at that, and look at the situation and say, why are they doing this? Why is this stuff going on? And if you followed our Annika Lucas interviews, 4-part interview series where we interviewed a child sex slave survivor, which is an incredible interview, like game-changing interview. People who watch that interview have a massive shift within themselves about this subject. It's 4 parts. It's 4.5 hours long. It's on CETV. You can start a free trial to watch it. But you start to understand that the perpetrators of these things need just as much healing as the people that have this stuff happen to. Meaning when you have the empathy, when you have the unconditional love to be understanding of what people are going through that makes them cause these acts, that creates a state of being, a state of consciousness, a state of disconnection that causes these acts, then you're able to start going about solving the issue. But without looking at that and without having the courage to look at that, meaning not seeing the experience as, oh, it's just this big negative thing, don't look at it, then we perpetuate it and we continue to allow it to be. And so thus, if you haven't seen the CE protocol, which is also on CETV, it's also on YouTube. Go to our YouTube channel, look up the CE protocol. There's 4 videos, 1 to 4. They're short. They're only like 7 minutes, 8 minutes long. But it explains how we go about what we do here at Collective Evolution from a media perspective, why we cover things neutrally, why we cover things with a conscious undertone to everything, and how we actually begin to take action within ourselves to create change within the world, both within ourselves and then the physical action that occurs afterwards. That whole protocol explains precisely why looking at the world as, oh, it's just negative, you can't do that, you can't touch that stuff, is only perpetuating the issue, is only perpetuating the challenge, right? We have to understand where we're at. And from the spiritual perspective, which there's truth, what you're going to notice is that there's truth to all of these 10 deceptions, but there's also nuance that, if not understood, creates fallacy within the 10 deceptions. And thus, when we try and look at it from an incomplete point of view, we get stuck either on one side of polarity or another side of polarity, right? And this is where the nuance brings us back to a deeper understanding. And so, for example, you might say, okay, great. Well, it's true though, isn't it? Like if I just focus on negative thought all the time, am I not just creating a state of being within myself, a state of energy within myself that's what you would call more negative, and I may not feel as good, I may not attract certain things, I may not have as harmonious of a life, and I'm sitting in a state of being, a state of frequency that's not as good. It's like, well, there is truth to that. However, I can be in a beautiful state of being within myself, a state of peace. I can observe something that people love to color as negative. I could say, oh yeah, you know what? I can feel, because I have empathy, I can feel that, yeah, that's not, I would love to raise awareness about that and help shift that situation. But I don't need to allow my emotions, my state of being, to get sucked into the situation. And so I could still have empathy, but I don't allow my emotions to control me, my emotions to take over, my emotions to cloud my experience, to lower my state of being, to put me in an energy where I'm like, oh my God, I'm just trashed, right? I'm not in a good place. That's where you're mastering the reality of ourselves, of our emotions, of the observer state, of seeing all that, being able to understand that it's like, I'm still able to empathize and take part in shifting and helping and shift an experience without having to move into the state of, oh my God, I'm emotionally distraught about looking at it. Right? And if you do get emotionally distraught, that's totally okay. And we're going to get to that one in number 2 here. It's totally okay to be emotionally distraught for a moment. The question is do we allow ourselves to stay in the state of emotionally distraught? All right. And that's the discussion we'll get into in a second. But so when we're looking at this negative stuff, right? Deception number 1, ignore the negative. We have to be willing to look at what we color as positive or negative. First, understand why we're coloring it as positive or negative, Then we have to be willing to look at it and say, if we want change on this planet, right? Because we feel that within ourselves. We all feel that deeply within ourselves, that we want to create change on this planet. If we want to create change, what does it take to create that change? Well, we have to observe what's actually going on in our world. We have to understand, hey, there's something here that doesn't feel so good. And we got to be willing to look at that. And that, quote unquote, might be called looking at the negative. But it's not even negative. It's how you color it. So we got to do that. We got to be willing to look at that stuff. But that's really what it comes down to here, is just, being able to observe these situations. Again, I highly recommend checking out the protocol to understand this even deeper, specifically as we start looking at the state of our world and what we need to understand here to be able to move forward. I mean, that's life is proposing that we start understanding what is taking. That's why all of this stuff is coming to the surface right now. There's so much stuff coming to the surface because it's time for us to begin to observe. It's time for us to begin to explore what we've been unconscious to our entire lives, because it's within that we learn and grow and evolve and move forward as beings, right? So let's move on to number 2 here. Number 2 is never get angry. So the little quote that I see here is, no one should ever get angry. It's an emotion that needs to be purged from your system. So This is, again, I would say there's truth to this 100%. I think the clarity is ultimately that it's about not allowing the emotions to drive you and not allowing the emotion to or even the state of being to think that it's like we need to get angry to create change. This is another classic belief system that's out there. Is like, oh, well, if we don't get mad at what's happening in the world, then we're not actually doing anything. We're not actually creating any change. So let's wheel this back for a second and start talking about the very basics of, what the deception states, that you shouldn't get angry, that if you get angry, you're acting from a state of unconsciousness per se, and thus you're not clear on something, which the truth within that is, from a more nuanced perspective, is the anger is a emotional response. It's like a physical response that you're going to feel, that you're going to go through, to looking at an event, looking at a situation, and being able to have a belief system, being able to have a program, to, for lack of a better word, in your mind that states, based on what I'm seeing in my reality out there, my belief system, my program states, I need to get angry at that, right? So you'll notice this is a belief system in a program in the very basics, that 2 people, 3 people, 4, 5 people, whoever you want to look at it, can be looking at the exact same situation, and each person is going to have a different reaction to it emotionally. One might stay neutral. One might be like, yeah, that's whatever. One might be like happy about it, and one might be super mad, right? So in the understanding that people are having different reactions, you start to understand that the reaction is based off of your own internal belief system about something, right? Thus, the anger is a response that's triggered as a result of that belief system within yourself. So what's really going on here is the emotion of anger is a feedback loop. It's a response that tells you how you're perceiving the situation. Thus, it's not about suppressing the anger. I'm not allowed to get angry. It's about letting it come up. You express it for a moment, and you say to yourself, why am I feeling angry? What's going on? What is the story? This is when you start bringing the consciousness into it. You're starting to observe yourself being angry, and you're starting to say, why am I mad? What's going on? Someone goes and takes your article that you've written online, they copy and they paste it, they put it on their own website, they don't credit your name, and they put it out there. And it goes viral, and you see it, and it's like, oh man, that went viral, and yours didn't. And you look at that, and you're angry, you're mad because someone took this from you. And it's like, oh, okay, great. So you get to observe all and again, don't get caught up in right or wrong here, right? Because we might jump to the conclusion that it's like, well, that's a wrong thing to do. Wrong based on what? In grade 12, I took a philosophy class that even to this day is something that I thought was, I mean, it just rings truth, right? If you again, the deeper the practice of spirituality and shifting their consciousness and coming back to a state where you truly recall the certain aspects of who you truly are, the greater, because again, through the shift that we're going through, we're moving from a state of consciousness where we believe we're simply a mind and a body to a state where we're understanding who we truly are. And through that, it shifts the way we look at things in a dramatic way, right? So now you have this question that I had in philosophy class, which was, without societal guidelines, rules, and laws, how do you know what's right and wrong? And you start to understand that this idea of right and wrong is man-made, right? Which is fine, but bear with me for a second. But that deeper is a feeling that when you recognize, and this is where the objection comes in. Well, if there wasn't law, if there wasn't rule, people would just be chaotic. No. If we were connected to who we truly are, connected to self, right? You have an understanding, you have a deep connection within that. In your being, you don't have a desire to do something that is harmful towards someone else, simply because you recognize that other person as yourself. And I'm not talking about it's a belief system that they're me. You fully recognize that they're yourself, and thus the feeling. You're not justifying to yourself, oh, what's the right or wrong thing to do? The feeling is simply, I wouldn't do that. You don't even think of doing that. You don't even think of being like, oh, I'm just going to take this and go do that, because that's not within that state of being, right? And now people are, oh, this sounds like an idealistic world. We'll never get there. We'll never get there. Okay, keep playing that game. That's up to you. That's up to you to keep exploring whether that's true or not. I can't sit here and tell you that that's yay or nay or whatever. You explore that as your own truth. What I'm suggesting is that I've witnessed it in my own life. I've witnessed it in the lives of a ton of other people. I've done countless years of research within out-of-body experiences, within NDEs, within people who have recalled past lives. I recall my own past lives. I recall different states of being. Since I was a child, came in with a different state of consciousness from what I observe as the general state. And I'm not saying these are states that aren't attainable by everybody. They absolutely are. But when it's similar to like when you practice something. When you practice something, you get better at it. You achieve different states of your skill or your being within that particular thing. It's exactly the same with states of consciousness. And I'm not talking about sleep and awake here in terms of like, oh, I'm sleeping, I'm awake, my eyes are open. I'm talking about states of consciousness where it's like, when we talk about this shift and shifting from a state of being where we're mind driven, we're ego driven, we don't see that we are the observer, that we are the experiencer behind the mind per se, right? Behind just the physical reality. When we're in the state where we don't understand that, thus the general state that you see in society today, we take everything a lot more at face value. It's just like, oh, anger, fighting, this, that, I gotta feel like this, I gotta be like that, I gotta, and thus we have our emotions, we have our unconscious per se that drives us. Whereas when you're in a state of being, and a lot of people will recognize this, for example, for those who may have experienced a specific type of experience while on psychedelics, you may recognize that when you stepped back, you realized there was perfection in everything, and you were observer of something, and you were like, oh my gosh, I'm not my body, I'm not my physical mind, there's something more to that. Many people have also had that exact same experience within dream states, that exact same experience within meditation, that exact same experience into what I like to call accidental waking life moments that give you that exact same understanding, right? And I've had many of those. But it's one of those things where when you have that notion, that state of consciousness, that state of being, that you recognizing it, and it's not a belief system, it's not a thought that you have, it's a state of being. You start to recognize that is a state of being that's totally capable of, or that's totally who you are, beyond when we're in what you could call a more unconscious state of just being within the mind. And so when we go back to this idea of like, okay, well, we can never get angry, right? If we're getting angry, we're stepping into these unconscious states of whatever. It's really about, the nuance is really understanding that the anger is showing us something within our minds, within ourselves, right? And the anger allows us to understand at a moment that, hey, we're not only do I have a belief system about something, but because the illusion is this. The illusion is that we have to get mad at what's happening in the world to create change. And this is false. That's the illusion. I look at many things in the world that I would love to help change. None of them make me angry. Maybe a couple of them here and there. But of like hundreds that I could probably list right now that I believe we need to shift as humanity, none of them, like very few of them, make me angry. Most of them I look at and I go, yeah, that's of a specific state of consciousness, a specific state of being. In order to shift that, we need to start asking better questions than, does this make us mad or happy? Because it's polarization. That's all it is, polarization. So instead of, we play the game of like, oh, what makes us happy? What makes us mad? You address the belief systems. And as you explore that, you have a greater understanding of self. You move into this different state of consciousness where you go, hold on a second. Is it even about the emotion, the mad or the happy? Or is it about, am I able to recognize what I want to shift in this world without having a significant emotional reaction to it? Well, the answer is yes, because I'm living proof of it, and I know many other people who are living proof of that as well. You do not require the anger. In fact, the anger usually does not actually solve the situation. It typically meets a greater opposition on the other side, or it makes the situation potentially worse. So what ends up happening is you'll see people go out to a protest and they'll be like, oh my God, angry, this needs to stop, blah, 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 right? And we do that. Well, what happens when you're in that state of frequency, when you're in that state of being? Well, you're in a lower state of being per se, a lower state of frequency, and it attracts sometimes the same state of frequency on the other side. Whereas you have the anger come up. Oh, I don't like what the government's doing. You have the anger come up. Okay, you feel the anger. You process the anger. You move to a point where you're like, all right, I'm no longer angry. Guess what? I still want to take action. I still want to move forward with creating a change there. It's still there. I didn't need the anger. The anger helped me see something, but that's it. I don't need it anymore. I'm not going to let it drive me. I'm not going to let it cloud my clarity. I'm not going to let it cloud how I'm going to talk to somebody and be demeaning towards people and be angry. You'll notice that a lot about people who believe anger will change the world. They talk to people like people are pieces of crap, like they're dumb, like they're idiots that don't see what's going on in the world. Thus, they create more divide, more disconnection, more, whatever. These people are asleep and these people are awake and these people are idiots and they're just causing problems and la-da-da. Those are people that are stuck in anger. Those are people who believe anger is what is needed to create change. And this is where I say the nuance to this is so important, because it's like the anger is simply there to show you something about yourself. Then the anger can be transmuted. You then ultimately, let's say you have a specific situation that comes into your life. What do you notice about a lot of extreme situations that happen? They produce change. They produce shifts within people. For example, you have the person that gets cancer, then all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, I'm questioning all these aspects of my life. I never lived. I didn't do this. I didn't treat my family how I really feel I should have. I wasn't paying attention. I was unconscious of so many of my days. I didn't take the time to smell the roses. Suddenly, they make it through the illness and they have a completely different outlook on life. That's more about being in a state of being than in a state of just, oh my God, I'm unconscious and I'm just going from one A to B to A to B, A to B, A to B. You know what I'm saying? It's the idea that oftentimes experiences provide us an opportunity to have a feedback loop that if we pay close attention to and explore that feedback loop, we understand aspects of ourselves in a deeper way. We then transmute, if we choose to, we transmute what that lesson is trying to show us. We move past, we process that experience, and we get into a state of being where we no longer need the experience to learn from it. What this means on a micro scale is exactly what it means on a collective scale. The more we process what is coming up in our world and what it's showing us about ourselves and then how that affects the collective, the more we actually process that stuff, the more change will actually happen. People have been quote unquote aware of what's going on in our world for decades now. Certain changes are happening, but many changes are not, and people are left losing patience. Why is it not changing? What is going on? So many people know about this. Why does Monsanto still exist? Why does this happen? Why does that? Because we're not actually processing and shifting our state of consciousness about it. We're simply aware, right? And so certain things are changing, yes, but overall the process doesn't fully shift simply because many of us are still in this state where the lesson still needs to be there. The role of that particular person still needs to be there. And you've seen this in your own life. When you have someone in your life who plays the role of being, let's say, highly judgmental, and they make you feel self-conscious. And then you do a whole bunch of work on yours, and this person doesn't go away. They're just always poking your buttons. They're there at the right time to just push your buttons, right? And then you do a whole bunch of work on your self-consciousness, and suddenly you're come to a state of being within yourself where you're like, you know what, this doesn't even affect me anymore. All of a sudden, either the person disappears, they're just not in your life anymore. They decide to move away, or they just don't have contact with you. Whatever happens. And you think, well, what happened there? Where did they go? What happened? Well, they didn't need to play that role in your life anymore. Looking at that on an individual scale is the same as looking at it on a collective scale. There's roles being played to allow us to experience things. Now, this isn't to say that we remove the severity of certain things that are happening. Again, that's the illusion. That's the mind wanting to come up with a mental objection as to why we shouldn't move from this state of being completely driven by our mind and our emotions to a state where we actually process that. We set aside the ego and the mind just running our entire show. Set that aside for a second and be like, look, I'm going to process what this loop is showing me, and I'm going to move to a different state of consciousness, different state of being as I observe my reality. And that's my take on the never get angry one. Yeah, I mean, of course you need to allow the emotion to come up, but you don't need to get stuck in it, and you don't need it to change the world. It's just, it's either there or it's not there, or it just is what it is, right? So number 3 here, it's all one, so it's all good. So the explanation here is that many New Agers tout concepts such as right and wrong as dualistic and therefore invalid. They try to convince us that everything is okay because we're all one. This is a dangerous moral relativism. So you'll recall that in this conversation already, we've talked about this exact thing. We've talked about how when you recognize, and this is where there's truth and there's non-truth to this statement, but we have to understand the nuance. We have to understand how this comes together. So what this is essentially stating is that people are saying, oh, well, they're sitting back going, oh, it's all one, so it's fine. And then they just go on with their day. That's the sort of passivism that this is suggesting. What this is saying is that that's wrong to do that, because we can't say that, oh, well, it's okay that these people are just going and killing these people because, we're all one, and they're saying you can't do that. Well, they're both making great points, right? One is that there's truth within this and these people are feeling this and there's truth within that. And the other is like, well, yeah, it's not about them being super passive. Like that's crazy. So what do we look at as the truth to this situation? Well, the truth of the situation is that the idea that we're experiencing duality today on the planet is not absolute. And this is a really tough one. We went into deep detail in an Elevate episode on CETV that again, if you want to dive in deeper, if you're ready to really dive deeper into a lot of these concepts and to exploring this stuff from a deeper point of view, that's an incredible show to do this, because this idea of duality and how we must live in duality and that this is the nature of our universe is, at least in my perception, and again, you look at the NDEs, you look at what's going on from all the research that's there, the people who remember past lives, my own experiences, right? People that I've talked to, their experiences. When you get into meditative states, if you've had out-of-body experiences and you looked at situations, if you've done psychedelics and you've seen, not everybody on psychedelics has this experience. I'm just saying, if you've seen certain things, right? You recognize that, yeah, there's a non-dual nature to the fabric of our reality. Beyond what we perceive here and get so engaged in, right? There's a non-dual nature. So then the question becomes, is the non-dual nature only when we're completely outside here? Or can we bring the non-dual nature into our everyday experience? That's an incredible question. It's an important question. And it's the question that is often missed in these nuances of this particular point. Because the reality of the situation is many people are doing that. They're bringing in, and again, we're going to get really clear here, but they're bringing in the non-dual nature of who we truly are, beyond the mind, beyond the ego. They're bringing that into our reality, and they're observing and living reality through that state of incredible freedom, right? And this doesn't mean freedom is I'm going to go and pop people in the head and kill them, because again, like we talked about in one of the first ones here, where we were talking about, it's a different state of being that recognizes everyone as an aspect of myself. It doesn't mean, oh yeah, I'm just going to go kill this person now, and I'm just going to go, do all this pedophilia stuff over here, or, I'm just going to go murder 10,000 animals because it's all one, it doesn't matter. No one's saying that. What they're saying is, well, not everybody is saying this, but it's what I'm saying right now. When you're in that state of being, you recognize that's another aspect of me. That's another aspect of me. That's another aspect of me. And there's not this state of, I want to take advantage of this person. I want to wrong this person. I want to go to, it's not there. You don't feel that within yourself to do that. It's not of that state of being to do that. And I know that the mind comes up with all these reasons of, I can't trust that. The reason why you can't trust that is because that comes from the state of being that is disconnected from everyone else. That is the dualistic game we've been playing. That if you observe the shift, where we're going, what we've been talking about, what we've been, talking about for 10 years here on CE, we're moving from that state of being, of disconnection, where we're all individualized in the sense of we want to take advantage, we want to compete, we want to do this, that people call human nature. We're moving from that to a state of being, and we're seeing this already happen. It's not like it's just either going to happen or it's not. It's happening. More and more people are moving to this state of being. And that's why you meet more and more people who are like-minded, who think this way, who feel this way, who be this way. key is the being, right? And you recognize this and you go, that is the shift. That's what we're going through, right? So it's not that you say, oh yeah, we're all one, and we justify stuff. But it's not also we're saying that the idea that we're all one is silly because, we're not all one per se. It's this idea that it's like, oh, you recognize, okay, we're at the fabric of everything, we're all one. Great. In our state of being where we're connected, where we remember who we truly are, right? We're not inclined to create these atrocities per se amongst one another. But the atrocities that exist today, we're still all one, but are coming from a state of consciousness, a state of being that is being in a state of disconnection. And from the state of we are one, we observe that and go, okay, this is this is the role that is being played. This is what's going on. This person's committing this because of this. How do we help awaken that person? So instead of just paying, oh yeah, we're all one, that's fine. No, you help talk to that soul, that person, the person who's there, not the soul. You're talking to the mind and allowing that to pass up through the soul. So the soul allows them to come through more. The non-dual nature of the soul allows them to come through to the experience more. You talk to the person and you work them through, you help them realize, you work them through the challenges they might have, the belief system they might be operating from, the state of consciousness, the limited states of being, the blind spots that may be there, and you're helping them through a loving, unconditional state where you're not judging them as like, you're so wrong, we need to fix you. You're going, okay, look, that's your state of consciousness now. We're ready to move up beyond that. We're ready to evolve beyond that. Most people are super bored of our world as it is today, right? So let's discuss, let's talk about, let's enlighten ourselves to how we can move to that state. This is why mental health issues are a huge challenge of today. It's a feedback loop that is stating, we're bored. We're not feeling so good here. There's a lot of things here that we need to start asking questions. And when you have a lot of mental health issues, what does it do? It makes you feel it's really hard to ignore. Stops you in your tracks, and it says to you, you gotta start asking big questions here. You gotta start figuring things out. You gotta start seeing what's going on. What are the belief systems? What is the unconscious nature of how we're living and operating and being? What programs are we telling ourselves? Are we living this state of being that we've outgrown, that we need to move beyond, but we first need to shine the flashlight on it to understand it, right? That's what this stuff is helping us to do. So again, it's about looking at it. You'll notice that all of this comes down to the same core principle of you're questioning the reality, you're questioning what we do today, from a non-judgmental point of view, but from recognizing, yeah, that creates that. That creates that. Okay, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? You recognize it, and you say, okay, let's create a shift, right? So that's what this is about. That's what this is about. Number 4, you can never really know. Oh, yeah, okay. So you can never really know anything. So the idea that, and the ideology that knowledge of anything outside of one's mind is unsure and therefore cannot be an objective reality and nothing can be truly known. Now, this is a good one, and this is one that I've heard a lot where it's like, especially you hear it in the flat earther community and stuff like that. And look, don't get me wrong. I don't think necessarily that, I don't believe the earth is flat from the way that flat earthers are discussing it and all that sort of stuff. There's so much more to that conversation in a particular way, but it can be, even from our physical world perspective. I've looked at a lot of this because I've had a lot of people kept saying, oh, you got to check this out. You got to check this out for so long. And then I was like, okay, finally I'll look at this. Fine. I'll look at what you're suggesting. And I look at it and I go, yeah, I've looked at a lot of evidence. I've read the quote unquote, the best people out there and I come back to the same thing. I'm like, it just doesn't resonate with me that it's flat in the way you're suggesting, and that it's, it is what it is. And there's too many things that show us that that's not the case. And even if we feel that this is one gigantic conspiracy, one gigantic thing, every single conspiracy, anything that happens on this planet that is trying to be covered up or hidden has very insanely simple ways of showing and providing evidence for that. Or there's 1 to 100,000 whistleblowers who can discuss this particular issue. Flat Earth has none of that. There's not a single individual that I've found that is of a whistleblower status that has said, or even given credence to the idea that this is a cover-up in the nature of what the flat earth community is discussing. But the idea that is often brought up in that community is, well, how can you know? You can't really know anything. The idea, because there's a couple of famous quotes out there, is something to the effect of, the greatest thing is when I recognize that I know nothing. It's, I don't know, something like, I don't remember the quote off the top of my head, but you've heard it before, where it's like, when you recognize that you know nothing, then you're in a wise state of being, so to speak. And what that is saying is not so much that you can't know anything. And especially from your own perception, it's the idea that it's suggesting to keep an open mind, but not such an open and obscure mind that you don't recognize even the basic nature of how we are in a shared co-created reality. And in the simple everyday terms of what that looks like is I'm sitting at a table, and what this table is its energy that has been collectively defined as a certain signature that creates a solid table that I can rest the computer on, my phone on. I can rest this cup that I'm going to drink some liquid from. It's fantastic beverage. We've collectively defined this as a table for the purposes of being able to have an experience that allows us to play very similarly to a video game so that we can collectively share an experience. If you were to take this idea that, okay, we know nothing, right? And you can never know anything. Well, imagine it like this. The people, Call of Duty, for example, I'm not into the game myself, but I know it is one of the most played video games across the world, right? Thousands and thousands of people come together and they play this game together. The only reason why they're able to do this together is because they understand and they know for certain many foundational aspects of how that game operates and how it works, so that they can come together and they can play the game together in one big way and have a great time doing it. So usually that's what they do. They have a great time playing the game. And no one's sitting there going, well, I have to keep this like philosophical open mind where, you know what, I know nothing. No, you do know that this map is like this and this map is like that, and that this gun comes out when you press this button, and to fire your gun is this. You know those things, right? That's the very nature, the very aspect of having this incarnated experience stems upon that certain things must be collectively known. Now, can they collectively change? Absolutely. And I've done a great video on this on YouTube where it's called How Collective Consciousness Works. And it explores the idea of how our collective consciousness, we see this with the double slit experiment, is defining collectively how this game we're playing called life works on a collective scale. And that you do have the ability to move beyond some of the collectively agreed limitations and quote unquote be an exception to the rule. But that on a collective scale, we define it at every given moment. And that if we collectively, for example, as some people have, like, you hear the stories of the monks that can levitate and the monks that can fly, and the people who have mastered that aspect of their consciousness, they can do that because they're going beyond a collective belief. If we collectively agreed by basically expanding our consciousness enough and being open to the reality that we can fly now. Guess what? We'd all have the ability to fly. The Superman ability to fly, and Superman the character, right? This idea blows people. No fucking way, that's not possible. If you look at collective reality, if you study this stuff enough and you look at quantum physics, you look at what's going on here, this idea is way less obscure than it actually sounds. And the whole point in how this relates to you can never really know anything is the nuance is really understanding that certain things are known. Certain things are accepted. Certain things, and I'm not saying accepted as in like, oh, I'm settling on this as accepting my reality. It's that certain things have to be known and have to be in place within our society for it to even operate, for our experience to even operate. The idea is being open to the fact that things can shift, things can change. And when we're checking in with ourselves and we're checking in with our states of consciousness, and when you feel that, and this is a detail that you through self-mastery, you start to understand and experience more. But when you start to feel, oh, you have outgrown this experience, or we've collectively outgrown this experience and we're ready to evolve it, we're ready to move forward with it. Those are the moments when you start saying, yeah, okay, let's move on to another layer of what we're capable of. Right. And I think it's within that people are discussing this idea that it's like, all right, yeah, like we don't really know, i.e. we can never really rigidly say this is the box that we're living in. Right. So where there's the truth and then the fallacy, people are saying, I don't want to be in this tiny little box of what life is, which is fair. Because guess what? That box can expand and can mold and can shape based on the more we open up our minds and our collective consciousness. However, there are aspects to that box that we agree upon to have this experience. And when you get into a state of awareness, you see those clear things that are like, yeah, we agreed upon this. We agreed to play like this. But when we're ready, we can remold this and reshape it and move it forward. Right? And that's the deeper nuance. Again, it's like people are, we were talking about on Elevate the other day, we were talking about the idea of gender and the labels. You can't label me as a man, a woman, all this big thing that's going on. And I don't identify as this. And sure, there's some, truth to it. There's some silliness to it. There's some confusion to it. There's a whole bunch of ways you can look at it. But a deeper underlying aspect of all of this is that people are feeling and are asking the deeper question of like, aside from just the physical parts, because the physical parts are obviously there for a specific purpose of reproduction, right? Beyond the physical parts, who says that a man or a woman has to be any specific way, right? We define all these characteristics of what a man is and what a woman is and all this sort of stuff, and most of it is hogwash. It's the reality of the situation. Most of it's silly. When you actually look at it, people want to be free in a sense. And now don't start coloring this with like, oh, well, people just want to walk around in women's high heels and all this stuff. No, just get away from the primitive thinking for a moment and think about it back to this for a second. Why does it state, for example, that a man has to only express his emotions this way, or that a woman is inherently more intuitive and that men not intuitive? Well, the reality of the situation is the male and the female body both have the exact same intuitive capability. It's a belief system that we've agreed upon and set up within ourselves that states, oh, a woman's more intuitive and a man's not. And what we're asking at a deeper question here is saying, stop identifying so hard with your alleged gender role per se, and step back and say, what are we truly capable of? What is this world truly about? Yeah, we come into a male body, we come into a female body to experiences the slight differences that do exist between the two, and to be able to set up an experience with a reproductive process. Beyond that, we made the rest up. It's all in our heads. It's all made up. And you have some people fighting so aggressively hard to be like, no, I could have a penis and call myself a woman. Okay, great. Go have fun doing that. And at the same time, you have people fighting so aggressively hard to say, no, a man is like this and is burly and does this and does that. And a woman is like this and, is emotional and is intuitive and does this and does that. Okay, go live inside a small little box and see how it feels. But collectively, we're having this discussion because we're starting to say, yeah, it's time to question some of these roles. And it's not roles in the ways that most people are talking about it, where it's like, oh, damn you for not addressing me by the pronoun I want to be addressed as. But, that's the ego wanting to be like, no, this is how I identify. This is who I am, and bow down to me and blah, 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 do exactly what I say, or else I'm going to be upset. You don't want me upset. Which is what? Childlike behavior, right? That's what the ego is like. It's a software program that operates on a very childlike mentality. Whereas the deeper question, and this is why we need to be having more conscious conversations about this stuff, is really asking people, what are we really after here? and this is again, we were talking about this on Elevate on CTV, is this idea of like, we're asking to question our reality, to question the limitations per se, not for the purposes of like, oh, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself right now, so I apologize, but I'm trying to make this point so evidently clear because I can hear the voices of people being like, oh, what? So what? It's bad to be masculine. It's bad to be feminine. It's bad. No. We're just saying the idea that, yes, you came in, you have a penis. It's because you chose to come in and have a penis. You came in, you have a vagina. It's because you chose to come in and have a vagina. You were playing this reproductive role. You were playing that reproductive role. And you're going to experience the slight differences that, each one of those things has. And the rest, you're free to do whatever you like. That's the truth of the situation, right? Now, do we need government to come in and change this policy and that policy? No, government doesn't even need to fucking get involved in the situation. It doesn't matter. Everything else that we're fighting for is really about us feeling like we're not powerful and capable enough within ourselves to just go and do what we want. And we like to stay in a victim mentality of being like, everyone's trying to stop me. The only people that are trying to stop people is ourselves. We're stopping ourselves. And if other people are actually impeding on a situation, like something like, oh, they didn't call me by my pronoun, why do we give power to that? Okay, that person didn't want to address me as Joe. They instead just want to call me Martino, and I don't like it. Okay, so I tell them, hey, I would prefer if you call me Joe. And they're like, no, fuck you. I'm not calling you Joe. Okay, cool. Like, why do I have to get upset? Why do I have to get mad? Why do I have to lose control? Good question to ask. Number 5, accept injustice, never resist. So the idea here is the abuse of meditation and yoga. The New Age movement has been distorting these practices into means to take people's minds off the fact that they have been enslaved and make it easy for them to accept the current condition of their world as their lot in life. Never take action to try and change the thing. This is in quotations. Never take actions to try and change the things that are wrong with this world. So you basically accept injustice, never resist. This is kind of similar to the angry one slightly, where the belief is that, oh yeah, you're supposed to just be accepting of the situation, right? Again, a lot of like what we talked about today. And this is where the nuance comes in again. So never resist. So it's like, how do we do, in this particular case, the issue is about the definition of resistance. So are people saying, what is resistance supposed to look like? Are we supposed to mob out in the street and be upset and throw shit around? Are we supposed to fight for certain things? What does accepting injustice look like? Oh, well, yeah, there's child pedophilia over there. Okay, yeah, just turn a blind eye and move forward and not pretend it's not there. What is it? This is where we start defining this stuff. We start looking at it. The reality of the situation is, again, when you process, we've talked about this, so I won't get into this one too much because it's very similar to the one we were talking about, the anger. When you process what it is that you're seeing, so you have the courage to see what's going on in the world, important. Again, CE protocol explains a lot of this stuff. So you have the courage to see what's going on in the world. You process the reaction, the belief system, everything that's coming forth with that. So you then have transmuted the lesson that it's trying to show you or us as a collective. You transmute that. Now you're in a position to say, all right, I'm in a different state of consciousness. I don't want this to continue because I feel like, so already you've pulled a lot of your power out of it just by transmuting and moving past the lesson it's trying to show us. Then you actively work towards creating a world, just like we're doing here with conscious media. Conscious media is about actively working towards creating a world where where we're operating from a different state of consciousness, where there's more harmony and where there's a state of being that is like, hey, we're connected to one another. It's not because it's like the other world is wrong and it's unjust. It's because I view the other world and we say, I don't want to play that game anymore. It's like, I'm done with that game. I'm over it. Like, we've played it for so long as a collective. We've been reincarnating, some of us, into this reality for such a long time, in the same state of being. We're ready to move on, right? It's like, what are you going to repeat grade 4 over and over and over and over and over and over again? Eventually you get to a point where it's like, I don't want to be in grade 4 anymore. I'm ready for grade 5. And so you start saying, hey, this class, let's go to grade 5. Let's do that. Some people resist and, oh no, we got to do this and I'm not comfortable with that and whatever. And just like, no, I want to play grade 5. Not because grade 4 is so wrong. It's because, hey, I'm ready to move to grade 5. Let's go. And so you start, creating campaigns. You start creating awareness. You start showing people a peek. Well, here's what grade 5 looks like. Here's what we could do. Why are you stuck in grade 4? What are you worried about? Why do you view grade 4 as we have to stay here? It has to be like this. And you observe the belief systems. You observe the reactions. You observe what's happening. You observe the resistance. You observe all these different things. And we say, okay, let's work through that. And we naturally move to grade 5. It's like when you resist something. I don't want to go talk on stage. I've had this problem many times. I don't want to go talk on stage because I'm fearful, whatever, I talk on stage. Yeah, that wasn't so bad. That really wasn't bad at all. My mind just made up a whole bunch of reasons as to why it was so bad, right? When you actually move through the stuff, everything is smooth. Everything is simple in a sense when you actually process it. But when you don't, and it lingers, it's always a fight. It's an ongoing battle because it's always going to be there to say, hey, you have a lesson here. We have to learn this particular thing. We have to evolve beyond this. So again, to go back to this is the suggestion is that, we're just accepting everything. Oh, it's okay. Accept the injustice. It's fine. Don't resist it. The police come, let them beat the shit out of you. Let them do all that stuff. No one's saying that. We're saying you simply look at it and you say, okay, there's an injustice. Okay, that's a barrier in us moving forward. Let's observe it. Let's see what's going on. Let's understand what's happening. And let's have collective conversations about how we can do that on a larger scale. That's what conscious media is. That's what we're doing. And that's how it's creating change. And it's lasting change because it's change that is no longer about I create one rule to, debug another rule. And then once that rule, we get tired of that one for a little, we create another rule to debug that one. And we keep going back and forth and repeating the cycle over and over again. And instead of doing that, we're saying, okay, that's a rule. Why do we have that rule? Do we need that rule? Everyone okay with letting that rule go? Okay, boom. And all of a sudden the video game expands. We can play it completely different, right? And that's what this is about. Number 6, a watered down law of attraction. So the new age variant of the law of attraction is largely based on modality of service to self, which is, again, this goes back to the state of consciousness that we've discussed so much, right? When we're in this individualized state of consciousness, we talk so much about how I got to go create my own wealth. I got to go create my own this. I got to create my own reality. I need this car. I need this house. I want this job. I want to feel like this all the time. I want to be like this. And it's not bad to think about any of those things. In fact, in a lot of cases, that's a good step to begin observing and thinking about a lot of those things. The question is from what state of being, what state of mind, what state of consciousness are we looking at creating our reality? Are we living through our parents' version of what our life should look like, the programming version of what our life should look like, the societal version of what our life should look like, the idea of societal success? Are we just trying to create that? Or are we really tapping into our true essence, our true aspect, our true heart, the true desire we have within ourselves, and then creating that and moving through that, which is a different state of being, a different state of consciousness, right? One is, this is me and I'm the mind and I'm in this and I'm trying to make my life the best as possible for all these different reasons, versus what is my heart and soul truly asking? Truly, why am I truly here at this moment in time? Which you have access to. You have access to determining this stuff. It's not that hard. It's a matter of, again, take the CE protocol, do the 5 days of you challenge, right? So the CE protocol, you go to cetv.1. You'll see right on the catalog page. You can go to the you don't even need to sign up for a free trial for this. You go to the catalog page, watch the protocol. At the end of the protocol, it's going to say to do the 5 days of you challenge. The 5 days of you challenge is a challenge I've put about 180,000 people through. The whole goal of it, the whole purpose of it, is to combine a formula that I put together to help people get in touch with themselves and to remove some of the limitations that stops us from operating and from being in a different state of being that actually shifts our consciousness, right? So that's what this process, that's what this 5 days of you challenge does. It's very simple. It's not overly demanding. You can do this in 5 days. Doesn't matter how busy you are. I specifically designed it this way. I've put a lot of people through this. It can be done. It doesn't take a lot of time each day. But the impact and the profound change is incredible. And what you'll understand is through that, you'll start getting in touch with a deeper aspect of why you're really here, in the sense of not like, what is my purpose, but because the purpose is to learn, grow, and evolve, right? But to see what my heart and soul, what me, truly me, wants to do, as opposed to what my mind wants to do and what I think I want to do based on the program, stories, and belief systems of society, our friends, our culture, and all these sorts of things. We're stepping beyond those things, which are, little limitations that we've set up. We're stepping beyond that and saying, all right, we're ready for an expanded version of reality, expanded version of awareness. Let's go see what that is, right? The other aspect of this watered down version of law of attraction that I find interesting is that the idea is that, again, by looking at the negative thing, I'm looking at the pedophilia in the world, and therefore I'm just creating more of it. No, by observing something doesn't create more of it, right? And again, you can debunk a lot of this stuff quite simply in your own experience, simply by saying, if it was as simple as, if I thought about oranges, I want oranges, I want oranges, then by law of attraction standard terms that most people put out there, someone should walk through the door with oranges and I should have oranges. Well, it doesn't really work that way, right? There's a lot more to this. It's like when people look at, or when they don't, when they don't look at the multi-factored analysis that contributes to why certain things are happening in society. So a lot of people are talking about race and gender right now, and we're trying to say, this happens to this particular person only because of their race or only because of their gender, and it's all about oppression. And it's like, no, the reality of the situation, you take a step back and you start looking at what's going on. You look at the statistics, you look at people's individual stories, you start to understand that there are multi-factors, many factors within why society has some of the issues that it has. And a lot of the times, it is nowhere close to the degree of importance people are placing on race and gender at the moment. It involves way more things. And the reason why we're not looking at it this way is because we're currently more concerned with a state of victimization versus a state of stepping back and stepping into true empowerment, which is really what this is about. And that's what society is challenging us to do in a lot of these cases, is step out of the victim mode, look at the multi-factored variation as to why it's actually variables as to why it's actually happening, and then go, how can I actually empower myself in the situation, versus saying, because I'm this, I'm completely shut down, which is simply not true. And, and that's what this is about. It's about understanding the deeper aspect of what's going on. So the watered down law of attraction here, I think, is an interesting one, because again, we're moving from service to self, just trying to create my own reality, just trying to create my thing. What is best for me as it serves all of humanity? Again, it's from a different state of being, and it's not a belief system where you're like, what is going to serve people best? And I think of all these reasons. No, you step back and you move into a state of being that is more your true essence. And that is not going to create from a selfish state of being or a service to self state of being. It's just automatically not going to do that. And the 5 Days of You challenge can help you get there. So again, CTV.1, go to the catalog. You can watch all this stuff for free. Turning the other cheek is number 7. So the false notion of unconditional forgiveness. So again, the idea of forgiveness for if we want to kind of examine this a little bit more, it's okay. So there's a little bit of a deeper explanation here. So true forgiveness does not mean continuing to excuse the willful commission of wrongdoing an infinite number of times. So the idea here is, this is a good point. If for example, someone does something, okay, yeah, you can come do that to me again. Oh, it's okay, I forgive you. They do it again. Oh, yeah, no, I forgive you. Oh, they do it again. Oh, I forgive you. And you repeat the cycle. And I've been through a similar experience to this, where it's like, I wouldn't say I was necessarily, oh yeah, forgive. It wasn't necessarily that. I recognized that I was repeating a cycle within myself of accepting, and I did a podcast about this, of allowing people to take advantage of me, right? And the reason why the cycle kept happening was because it's not because I need to go and look at the other person as an asshole. It's, I need to go, am I allowing this process to keep repeating? I'm not necessarily turning the other cheek. I'm going, okay, yeah, well, maybe they'll change. They're taking advantage of me, but maybe it'll shift. When in reality, I was too afraid to say, hey, you know what? You're in a state of being where you're taking advantage of people a lot. And here's what I'm observing. And I respect you for where you're at in your journey. I now need to take it upon myself, within myself, to say, I can't be part of this anymore. And I move on. And I don't allow that person, I set a boundary, if you will, and I don't allow that person, but I don't set a boundary calling them a rat piece of shit or calling them whatever it might be. I set my boundary and say, yeah, okay, when you're ready, here's what, and that's exactly what I did. Here's all the things that I observe that I think you need to go address and observe within yourself and reflect on within yourself. And you go and you do that. Now, obviously in other situations, and again, I talked about this in previous podcasts, where it's like other situations where it's like someone might be doing physical harm to somebody. Well, yeah, you say, okay, well, hold on a second. We need to move the people out of physical harm in a sense. So I'm here to help. We'll make sure we remove the physical harm. But then from there, you apply the same process, right? So you do whatever it takes to remove from physical harm, to remove from these, sorts of things. So a murderer, you isolate for a period of time. Now, I don't believe in our prison system as it is, but it's like, let's say you have a murderer going around murdering people, Okay, you isolate them for a specific period of time, and you treat them with the unconditional love. I'm not concerned about forgiveness at the moment. Unconditional love that's required to help that person understand and transmute the experiences, the disconnection that they have within themselves, such that they can be actually healed, versus just seeing them as, oh, they're a murderer. We're going to throw them in a 6x8 cell. We're going to release them, say, potentially, depending on the type of murder, 20 years later, 15 years later, whatever it may be. And really, they've only gotten worse, right? So it's less about the forgiveness and more about looking at why it's happening and determining, hey, do I want to keep subjecting myself to this or not? It's sort of like the other example. I forget which one it was. Maybe it was the It's All One that we were discussing, where I was talking about how you'll notice that when you move beyond the self-consciousness, suddenly that person's not in your life anymore. Very similar to this. When you're ready to determine the lesson that someone might be showing you, and it's not about turning the other cheek, accepting them, oh yeah, just whatever. When you're ready to accept that lesson, usually the person goes away, disappears. The situation changes because you've accepted what it is that you need to learn about it. And it's hard to believe that sometimes, but time and time again, we see it. And you've seen it in your own life at some point, for sure. The challenge is on more challenging experiences, sometimes we're unwilling to look at ourselves, because it always comes back to us observing ourselves. But again, I'm not saying someone's beating you down and you have to just say, oh, well, this is about me, I'm the bad person. No one's saying that. This is another one of those mental objections to stop us from truly taking the action that's going to help situations. So someone's beating you down. I'm going to be very clear on this. Someone's beating you down, whatever it may be. You remove yourself from the situation. Removed. So now you're no longer getting beaten down. You say, okay, why the heck do I let this happen? What is it within me that I keep allowing this to happen, or I keep opening to this experience? Because there's usually something there, right? We've all had this type of experience in different forms, right? And you address that and you move through that, right? It's like you hear the people who have the same relationship over and over again. They keep meeting the exact same person somehow. Why is that happening? Well, because we're still emanating that particular energy, and it's still saying, someone's still coming and playing the role of saying, hey, you need to look at this. Right? And this is why some people will say sometimes, you'll be in a whole relationship in a sense when you've achieved wholeness in a sense within yourself. Now, obviously there's a lot more to that conversation, but in a very simple term, what it's suggesting and what it's saying is that, we only can really experience wholeness in ourselves. And the more work we do on ourselves, the more deep of a connection of relationship we have with someone else. Because it's less about, I'm trying to just protect myself from this or whatever, or I'm attracting these experiences that need to teach me all these lessons constantly, and more about actively flowing and moving through the challenges that come up. So again, this isn't about, you just accept everybody, you can keep abusing me. It's not that. This is a good point. But it's also not about saying this person's evil and we need to stop. We've been over that, right? Number 8, chaos should be feared. So if I give up my freedoms, then it'll be safe. The current control and slavery system is about limitation of free will, of aspiration, through the destruction of possibility, the death of imagination. So the idea here is that it's like, we'll read a little deeper here. The true freedom includes infinite possibility. which by definition includes the possibility of chaos. So what the suggestion here is that oftentimes people will say, well, if we don't have police and we don't have the government, we don't have this, it'll be chaos. So I'm willing to give up my freedoms and liberties, if you want to call it that, right, for the government to control things and to make sure everything's okay and to make sure everything's this and whatever. Because without that, then I don't even know, to be honest, if this one's a new age deception at all. In fact, I think this is not even a new age deception. This is something that just a lot of people believe, that without certain things within our society, then there would be chaos. And I don't know that I agree with that at all, to be honest, because the idea that we need to have an authority figure is the parent-child relationship that we so commonly see in many aspects of our lives, and that comes out of a state of being that does not want to take responsibility for self, but that is also disconnected from self. And so thus to solve this particular challenge that we're having, where we are consistently having to give up our power to somebody else who then governs us, is really just a reflection of us saying, I don't take any responsibility. I can't take care of myself. I can't do these particular things on a deeper scale, and therefore you need to come in and do it. Now, that isn't also to say that the government doesn't serve some purposes that even in a post-shift perfect world, if you want to call it that, that aren't actually quite useful. There are certain aspects to what you could call, I don't want to say the word government because I don't believe in government, but certain aspects of setting up organization such that a society can run smoothly. So like, for example, if you're setting up a process, okay, you're writing code for a website. You can write code for a website that takes 10 seconds to load versus code for a website that takes 0.5 seconds to load. Now, the difference there is just the efficiency that's built within the actual system. Now, the end result is exactly the same. You have the exact same freedom and ability to read every aspect of the website, to use all the beautiful features and do everything that you need. It's just one has a system of organization that actually functions properly, and the other one is very inefficient. So the example that's being made here is ultimately that organization, or what sometimes people say, if there's aspects of government that are actually helpful. Well, yes, there are certain things that it's like, yeah, it's helpful to have some organization. If 100 people need to get a ticket to something and everyone's just standing in a pool of people, well, guess what? There's no efficiency, and everyone's just going to kind of be, oh, is it my turn? Versus you get in a line. No belief systems about, oh my God, I was here first. Oh, you butted me. Forget that for a second. You get in a line and you move through the process. Right? And that's it. It organizes the situation such that everyone can do it, right? But this is the thing, is most of this stuff is absolute common sense. It's something that you would automatically do anyway within yourself, because you recognize, okay, well, my turn. Okay, well, we'll do this. Okay, we'll make it like that. We naturally look for ways to innovate on situations to make it smoother for us to move forward, regardless of economy, right? And you see that within the animal kingdom and so forth as well, right? We look for ways to more simply or more easily do certain things. And so the idea here is, what is chaos really, right? And how do we know, and this is the illusion of government, obviously, is the government will tell you all the time that without us, you have nothing. Without us, it's going to be this. Without the police force, it'll look like this. Without us going and killing 1 million people in Iraq and destabilizing their whole country and taking control of it and taking the oil, then you're all going to die. And that's how they justify things, right? And through fear, we believe all this stuff, and we go into this whole thing. But the reality of the situation is, in those particular cases, we don't actually know what it would look like, because in most cases, we've been unwilling to actually go down that route and see what it looks like. But in a different state of being, in a different state of consciousness, right, which is where we're shifting. Again, we're talking about the shift. It's already happening. It's not just going to snap one day and it's done. And it's not just like, oh, okay, we haven't even started the process. It's happening. It's moving. That's why we're having these conversations. That's why there's tons of people who think this way and who feel this way, right? It's happening. So the process we're moving through is really about us starting to understand and starting to see, okay, hey, do we really need governance? It's not about judging government. Do we really need it? Is this really what, if I take responsibility for myself, if I set up, different things within our society, within this, just to help us move along, and if I'm really accountable and these sorts of things, which again, come from a state of being, right? Where we're not disconnected fighting for one another, but we're in a different state of being where you see each other not again out of belief system, but actual state of being, you see each other as, yeah, hey, it's another aspect of myself, then all the stuff isn't like that anyway, right? Right now we believe we need to have rulers and masters, and so we do. Plain and simple. Just trying to check how much time we've got. Ooh, it's been a longie here. Number 9, we must feel good all the time. Yeah, another interesting one here where it's like, going back to the anger one, it's a little bit repetitive here in some ways, but it's like, oh, well, I'm awake now, or, oh, I'm spiritual now, and therefore I just feel good all the time, and I have to put on this mask or this facade, or, my Instagram posts always have to be about, oh, it's feeling good. It's all, oh, it's just about, I feel amazing. It's no. The reality of the situation is what we're doing here as we become more conscious is we're bringing light to the aspects of darkness within ourselves, right? We're starting to see this. We're looking at what's going on. Again, going back to the CE protocol, we're looking at what's going on. We're seeing what's happening. We process the emotions. If we go into them, great. We go into them for a moment. We process it, and then we move out of it. And we're not moving out of it because now I need to feel elated. I need to feel super happy, and I'm chasing happiness. We're moving out of it, and we're going back to this neutral, peaceful state within ourselves. And then we go about and we have experiences. And if the experience pulls us momentarily into another emotion, great. We go through that, we feel that experience, and we come back out of it, right? And that's what we're doing. And we're coming back out of it to a state of, okay, I'm peaceful. I'm moving through the process again, moving through life, right? We don't need to be in a state where it's like, we need to avoid anything that makes us uncomfortable, right? This is, again, the left right now is very much like that. Whoa. Anything in society that makes me feel even the remote bit uncomfortable, I get triggered by. Therefore, we need to set up barriers as to why that can't happen. Because I don't want to look at anything within myself because I need to feel good all the time. Now, that's silly, right? All that is saying is that I don't want to understand why we have certain little differences within society. Not only that, but I want to incite more of these issues by saying, no, we need to set up all these barriers, right? Because that's so much of what's happening right now. It's like, oh, you can't say this to this person. You can't say that to that person. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. You can't do that. And it's like, when you're taking away people's freedoms constantly all the time, you're telling them what they can and cannot do. You only incite more of that on the other side. When in reality, we need to be asking the question of like, why am I so uncomfortable? Why am I so triggered? Why am I so emotionally uncontrollable here? What is going on? And then why do we on the flip side want to fight the other side for doing that? As opposed to just bringing them to reality of like the questions I just asked. You don't oppose those people. You don't say, oh, you're wrong for trying to take away everybody's liberties. Why do you want to take away the liberties? What is that going to do? Where is that going to lead? What is it about you that wants to set up all these barriers? Where are you feeling triggered within yourself that you can't possibly see someone address you by a pronoun that is not correct, right? Where is that lack of control? Where is that lack of true understanding of self? And through that process, we work through our programs, our emotions, our belief systems, and we actually get somewhere. And what I'm suggesting is this is why, again, we believe deeply in conscious media, is it brings consciousness into the pop culture, the current events of today. Because we're having those conversations with no consciousness because we believe that we need to separate consciousness and spirituality from what happens in our current events. Because there's life over here and then there's just this crap over here. What I'm saying is, no, it's all one thing. It's all part of the exact same thing. There is no difference. The challenge is culturally, we don't like to actually look at why our issues are there unless we're creating a victim and a victimizer mentality. And that is not helpful in creating change. It creates temporary barriers or temporary band-aids over here, or then it pops up again over here, and and then it pops up again over here. Okay, we'll fill that leak. It pops again over there. Whereas we need to change the infrastructure of this whole thing such that we're not trying to patch leaks constantly. We change the infrastructure. And that's what bringing consciousness into this whole situation is. Number 10, last one here. Truth doesn't need to be defended. So never confront anyone on their bullshit, even though it is harming people. There is no need to defend truth. So this is an interesting one. Again, this is where you start seeing the way that these deceptions are written. You also start seeing the polarity on the other side and the sort of the frustration on the other side, which again goes back to why this needs to be processed, right? But it's the idea of if someone has a belief system that is, let's say, limiting themselves or others, Yeah, it's okay. We don't need to address them and just leave it alone, which again, it goes back to exactly what we just said in number 9 there. You observe people for what they're doing, and we don't need to confront them on their bullshit, right? And all this sort of stuff, the way it's written and the way it is. It's like it shows that there's us and there's them. It's the limited state of being that we like to operate in. The victim, the victimizers, the right people, the wrong people, the ones who are, good, the ones who are bad, the ones who are aware, the ones who are asleep. When in reality, it's like, okay, you have people having an experience. And if you want to change, we have to all evolve collectively, right? Collective evolution. So you start asking the questions. Why do you have that thought? Why do you have that belief system? Can you see that thought, that belief system is leading us down to this particular thing? Are we really just limited to having to do this particular thing? Is that really what this is about? Do you really want to be in a state where we're trying to set up all these barriers and limitations for what people can and cannot say? And you ask questions and you get people to question their own belief systems. You're not judging them for it. You're not telling them they're idiots, they're right, they're wrong, whatever it may be. You're saying, what are you doing? You're asking questions. What's it about? Why are you limiting us to that? Is that truly what you think humans are? Is that truly what you think we're capable of? You lead people back to understanding themselves, and it creates questioning that isn't getting the ego triggered and defensive and all upset and blah, 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 but gets people to question. And I've done this for 10 years, so you can't tell me this doesn't work, because it does. I can 100% know that it does, right? But you get people to question, and then they move out of that state of anger, and they move out of that state of defensive, and they go back and they go, yeah, you know what, you're right. And then you see that person, you see the light bulb go off, and you see them go, oh shit. And then all of a sudden they have a different perspective. They're operating from a different state of consciousness, a different state of understanding. And thus, you've shifted consciousness. You've created a change that is going to last, right? And that's the difference. That's the difference between looking at people as either right or wrong all the time, and instead looking at it for how we can actually make a change that's legitimate, that isn't just about band-aiding the solution, but that's actually about restructuring what we're doing at its foundation. Different state of consciousness, different world, reality of the situation. That's it. That's all. So we've gone through those 10. Again, if you want I think, a deeper understanding of this stuff, I know we talked about a lot of stuff here, but it's an important one. Been wanting to talk about for years, but I highly, highly, highly recommend go check out the CE protocol and do the 5 days of you challenge. CETV.1, as in one as in ONE. Click the catalog, go to the 5 days of you challenge, CE protocol. They're right there at the top. They're both available to watch. You don't even need to sign up for the trial. But by all means, if you want to watch anything else, sign up for the trial. Go do what you need to do. If you want to support us, when you sign up for this and you become a supporting member, it supports our work. If you don't want to be a member of CTV, you can always support our work through our CMM campaign as well, which is explorers.collective-evolution.com/CMM. It's also at the bottom of every single article, so you can find us that way, and that's how you can support our journalism. But I recommend taking those courses. Again, we put this stuff out for free because our concern, our desire, I will say, that comes from the deeper aspects of self, is to help create a shift and help create a change. And these particular things, as much as we need finances to support ourselves and all this sort of stuff, there are certain things that I feel very deeply about putting out make sure that everyone has access to and everyone can experience them. And the 5 days you challenge and the CE protocol are something that I believe truly can help and, create shifts that continue along a journey. And, that's why I recommend going and checking her out. Alrighty, that's it. That's all. That's been another episode. Sorry for this one being a little longer, but there was, some key things to discuss here and to go over. And I know sometimes I'm long-winded, but it's because of, again, 10 years of when you miss one little sentence, when you miss one little thing, the mind comes up with a reason that's, oh no, this is not true, or oh, this is because of this. So I try and address all the various things that I've heard and that I've seen and that I've, had as objections over the years to help bring as deep an understanding of this stuff as possible. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the CE Podcast. Peace.